In the last couple of years, Adobe has brought some phenomenal updates to their pinnacle photo editing program, Lightroom. If you aren't utilizing some of the latest updates, you absolutely should be, and that is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey everybody, my name is Austin James Jackson. I'm a landscape photographer based here in Southern Utah, and in today's video, we are talking about the most popular photo editor on the market today, Lightroom. The ability to both effectively catalog and edit your photos with powerful sliders really does make Lightroom an absolute behemoth and a photographer's sidekick. So in the past, Lightroom has not quite stacked up to the photo editing capabilities of its big brother Photoshop. However, with recent updates in the last couple of years, Lightroom has really narrowed that margin. In this video, I'm stoked to show you guys how to edit your landscape photography in Lightroom effectively with excellent results. Here we go, guys. Let's go ahead and jump right in there. So first things first, you're going to find the photo that you want to use for the edit. Now, I'm in the library module right now. I've got my stuff in this unsorted folder, which is just where I put all my photos after I'm done with the shoot before I've done any editing. Then I've got my photo right here. So if you want to see more than just the photos that you're looking at right now, you can click right here, which will allow you to open up kind of a grid view where you can see lots of photos and scroll through. So find the photo that you want to edit and then go ahead and hit develop. That's going to bring you into the develop module here. We can close this down, and then I'm going to close the film strip down by clicking on the little arrow. I'm going to open up my edits on the side. I just like to do that in order to get my photo as big as possible, because you can see if this is open and this is open, our photo is a lot smaller and we're not going to be moving around. We're going to be sticking on this one photo. So just like in any other updates of Lightroom, you're going to start by adjusting the basic sliders here in order to start your edit. So for this particular photo, the tonality is actually looking pretty good, but I might want to bring up the shadows just a touch and bring down the highlights just a touch, just to kind of bring out some of the highlights of this scene, and not literally the highlights, but the actual what looks good in the scene, such as the clouds. I might bring the whites up to give that a little punch, and I might bring the blacks up as well, just a hair. Now, I'm really careful about adjusting the texture, clarity, and dehaze sliders. In fact, I'm not even going to touch them at all. We can do a little bit of vibrance and a little bit of saturation, but we're going to adjust this a little bit more later as well. Now, the next thing we can do is continue to scroll down. I do want to remove these people right here, though, because it's driving me crazy looking at these people right there. So if you have any spots or anything like that, a lot of times I recommend waiting until the end to do this, but if you're like me, it's driving you nuts to look at people or spots or whatever it may be. So if you want to fix it, go ahead and hit on the little band-aid right here. Then you have a few options. Okay, so to spot heal these people out, I've got a couple options. I've got this clone, I've got the like a heal, and then I've got the content aware remove. In Lightroom here, I'm actually really liking the content aware remove. I'm gonna reduce the size of this brush a little bit, and then I'm just going to go in here and hit each and every person. And essentially what this is gonna do is Lightroom is smart enough, or hopefully it's smart enough, that it is going to replace him without obstructing. Yeah, you can see it's done a really nice job. It's preserved the rock. And I tried doing a couple other things. I tried using that, the Band-Aid, the healing tool, which wasn't working very well. The clone was working all right, but certainly this tool was working the best. I encourage you guys to try all three if you're having issues with one, because there's some that work better for some things and others that work better for others. But I think that is looking pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. Of course, there's still a few things I may touch that up later, but for the sake of this video, that's looking good. When you zoom out, looks much better. So now we're back to our regular photo. To close this, you just click on the Band-Aid again, and then you can come back out here. So let's go ahead and scroll down here. Some of the things that I like to do when I'm editing my photo here is maybe adjust the tone curve. So they recently have added some changes to the tone curve. Still the only thing that I'm really gonna use it for. I'm gonna go in here and I'm just gonna create a little S curve. You can see how that brightens things. So I want to go on this like right kind of quarter here on this line, and I wanna drag that up, and then I wanna go on the left quarter here. I want to drag that down in order to add a little bit of contrast. One of the things that I always like to do, I don't see a lot of photographers doing this, but something that I personally like is to just grab the very bottom and bring it up like maybe to where the output is like 3 or 4. That's just gonna kind of bring these blacks off the bottom, make them look a little bit nicer so they're not so washed out. You can see that this works in pretty quick as I continue to drag this up. So you do have to be careful here that you're not doing too much, but somewhere about right in there looks good to me. Now you can toggle this eyeball by clicking and holding in order to see what you've done with that last effect. I think that's looking really good for my personal taste. And then you can continue to scroll down. Now, if you want to stay organized, you can close the tone curve box here, and you can close the basic box and just continue to work down. Next, we're going to go into the HSL and color sliders. So in these HSL and color sliders, yours might look something like one of these. If you click all, you can get everything open at once. This is going to be your go-to for adjusting anything color in the image. Now, I think the first thing that I want to do to this image is adjust the blues. The cool thing about the HSL sliders is it allows me to target just specific colors in the image, which will work incredibly well in this image for something like the blues, where there's nothing else that's like these blues. Targeting something like the oranges is going to be more difficult because it's going to target a wide range of the image, but to target the blues, this is perfect. So hue would allow me to adjust and make those blues a different shade of blue. So make them a little more purple or make them a little more aqua or greenish, which I don't want to do. I actually really like the hue of the blues in this photo. I think they're looking pretty accurate. So what I want to do is adjust the saturation and the luminance. Saturation is going to adjust the intensity of the color, while luminance is going to adjust how bright that color is. So for this photo, I think luminance, adding a little bit there. You have to be careful and worry about the kind of the banding that you get with the clouds here. So I don't want to add too much, and then I want to reduce the saturation just a touch. And I'm just trying to create something that looks realistic here. That's looking pretty good to me. If you wanted to adjust the saturation, you could do that to the oranges as well. As you can see, it gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. So that might be something that's going to be more suited to a local adjustment, which I'll show you in just a second. Pretty happy with that. We're going to close that down. Now, color grading is something that you can use. I don't use it a whole heck of a lot, but it is something that can be pretty fun to play with. In this particular photo, you would want to cool down the shadows and warm the highlights. You can do that by dragging this circle around. You can see right here it says shadows. Hold the shift bar, click and drag this out. That's going to allow you to bring some coolness into the shadows, and as you can see, it works in pretty quickly. And then for the highlights, we can go opposite and bring in some warm tones. And we'll show you what this does here. Let me just go ahead and do a little bit more for the sake of the example. And we'll toggle the before and the after. So the shadows are a little much, and I can turn the brightness of the shadows down as well using this luminance slider down here. I think I just want to reduce how much that's affecting the photo. And to be honest, like I said, I probably wouldn't normally use this, but just for the sake of the tutorial, I wanted to show you guys how to use it because some of you guys may like this color grading feature. We're going to close that down. Now we've got options for sharpening. A lot of times I'll do this first in my image, but just working down is a way that works a little bit better for most people. It's easier to remember. So if you want to use this for the sharpness, this would be called capture sharpening. You're sharpening the raw image. You're going to go ahead and hold Alt and Option and drag the masking slider. Now, when you drag this, anything on your image that's white is going to be sharpened. Anything that's black is not going to be sharpened. Now, this is good because as you can see, we're really hitting the edges nicely. And I'm looking for something like this where it's selecting the edges nicely. And we don't want to be selecting everything else because, like, obviously we don't want to be sharpening the clouds and all that stuff. We can go ahead and bring the detail all the way up to 100, the radius down to 0.5. This is what I like to do for landscape photography. If you're a portrait photographer, you may want to do things a little bit differently. But then I can go ahead and click on the image to zoom in, and then we can increase the sharpening. You can see we don't want to be adding this like noise and grain. So I'm going to drop this until I'm no longer adding that anymore. Now this is looking pretty good to me. And we'll do a little bit of denoising at the end of the image probably. It's not very noisy, but we'll do a little bit of denoising just to show you how that works. I'm gonna close that down for now. Of course, you can do the lens corrections if you want, which I probably should have done at the beginning. But again, I'm just trying to work straight down because it's a workflow that's really easy for people to follow. You can see when you do that, it's kind of fixed the vignette. So now my image is a little bit too bright. So I'll go back up to the basic. That's the nice thing here in Lightroom. It's really easy to open this stuff up and readjust. I can also come back down here to the vignetting, and I can reduce this to introduce that vignette a little bit back into the image. We're gonna add a little more vignette later, but I think that's looking pretty good. You can go down, transform is something we're not gonna use for this particular image. This would be if you wanted to like tilt the image or do something crazy like that. You're gonna see that a lot for like architecture and things like that. I'm gonna close that down. Now we've got effects here. This is where we can apply a vignette. We're gonna do this later. And then we've got calibration, which occasionally you'll see landscape photographers grab this blue primary slider and slide that up. But I actually am gonna do it for this image. Now that I look at this, I didn't think it was gonna look that great, but it actually looks pretty nice. Drag that hue, that saturation on the blue primary up all the way. Now, essentially what this does is it's different than what a lot of people think. This is not a blue saturation slider. It's different than what's in the HSL. Essentially what this blue primary does is it increases the amount of blue in every color. And I don't know why, but for some reason this makes it a lot more appealing to the eye, especially for landscape photography. You can see how it's popped a lot of my colors. However, the colors are feeling a little strong now, so I might go back up, make some adjustments to my vibrance and my saturation, and then come back down to the HSL and color tab and reduce the saturation of the blue a little bit. And somewhere in there is looking pretty good to me. So the next part of this video is kind of where Lightroom has really improved from the last few years. And in 2023, there's a lot of great options here. We're gonna talk a little bit about doing some local adjustments. Now we're gonna do that here in this little like circular selection, weird looking box. This is where you have all of your local adjustments. So you can make a selection and do things from there. Now, when I'm talking about a selection, that means like I can select something like, oh, I wanna select this orange cloud in order to increase the brightness, or oh, I wanna select the foreground, the light on the foreground and make that really pop. So there's a lot of different things that you can do here in order to make your photo look a little bit better. Now you can do things like select objects, which for landscape photography is pretty hit or miss. You can use a brush, which is always good, but usually never great. And then you can use a linear or radial gradient, or you can use range, which is color or luminosity range, meaning it's gonna select based on the color, or it's gonna select based on the lightness values in your image. You can, of course, combine multiple things, which can be really, really helpful as well. So on this image, I just want to show you guys a few examples here of things that I may do. First thing, I want to grab my radial gradient, and I want to kind of do something to this rock. I'm not totally sure what yet, but let me grab this radial gradient. You can see anything that's white is going to be selected. Anything that's black is not. And you can uncheck show overlay in order to see your photo a little bit better. You can see we're making a selection here. So I could go in and increase the shadows of the rock a little bit. And I could also go in, and usually when you increase the blacks, it's going to not look very good, but you could bring it up just a touch. And I might go down here and even reduce the dehaze. So what I'm trying to do here is basically just make it look like this rock is further away than it really is. By reducing like the contrast on the rock and the dehaze, I'm kind of making it so this rock looks like it's further away, like there's more atmosphere going through it. And maybe like that much. We can reduce the contrast on the rock as well. Kind of just make it look like that rock is a little bit further away. So I'm really liking what that is doing there for our subject. I can go ahead and once again toggle this just like that with this eyeball. Now, if you're finding that the effects are bleeding over into the sky, you can combine this mask, which can be really, really helpful. So what I want to do is actually subtract, and I'm going to subtract I'm going to do select sky. Essentially what this is going to do is it's hopefully going to do a good job of selecting the sky, and it's going to subtract that from our mask so that we aren't affecting the sky. And there, it's looking like it's done pretty good. Let's show the overlay and see how it's done. Sometimes it takes a second to load out here, and it's done a phenomenal job. You can see we're not getting any of that sky anymore, which is perfect. We're just selecting that subject rock, which is exactly what I want. And it's looking great. We can do a couple more things now also that we've done that. I'm going to increase the saturation, which I was a little worried about doing before because we don't want to bring up the blues. But now that we are just selecting down here, it's a lot easier to make some adjustments and make them still look pretty realistic. Somewhere in there is looking pretty good to me. Now, I also want to go in and I want to kind of pop the highlights here where the sunlight is hitting in the foreground. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new mask here. I'm going to click right here, and we're going to use a linear gradient. The way the linear gradient works is you click and you drag. Anything on the opposite side of where you click is going to be totally selected. Anything between the clicks is going to be partially selected. Anything on the other side of the click where you end is going to not be selected at all. Now that might be super confusing, but let me show you what I mean. So I click and drag. Anything on this bottom side of the image is 100% selected. Anything in between my two clicks, as you can see there, is a gradient fading out. Anything above is not selected at all. Let's uncheck that show overlay box again, and we will make some adjustments here. Now I'm guessing that we're going to want to pop the whites here. And again, this is totally just guessing. I don't know this to be a fact, but I think I want to, actually, I might want to go into use the curves here, and we can really make this pop, I think. And we want to make sure these shadows are staying down. We don't want those shadows to brighten up too terribly much. But, oops, and I want to make sure I don't create another point when I use the curve. And maybe I'll bring this very bottom up just a hair. Don't want to lose the shadows too much here. Yeah, somewhere in there is starting to look pretty nice for me. Maybe I'll pop the highlights. That should help in order to bring this out a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. And I think that's looking really good. Let's go ahead and toggle that effect as well. So we've got the before and we've got the after. We've really made that pop quite a bit. Once this loads out, there it is. Yeah, you can see we've really made that sunlight that's hitting pop, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want to do. Now, there's obviously so many other things that you could do here. Maybe the last thing that I would do is go in and do something to this cloud here, because I do want to show you guys how to use the brush. So in order to use the brush, again, create new mask. I'm going to go ahead and grab the brush tool here. Then we are going to go in and I'm just going to paint onto this cloud. And we'll let that load out there. You can see that I'm running on a decent computer. It's not great. It is struggling a little bit with the recording. So as you can see that these masks are a little bit more intensive on the graphics here than something like using basic sliders. So I want to go ahead and let's actually let's do this a little bit different way. I'm going to go ahead and delete this mask here. I want to create a new mask with the sky, and then I'm going to go in and use the brush to just select the areas where we want to hit in the sky. This is essentially doing the same thing that I was doing, but I'm just doing it a little bit different way in order to make it a little bit more straightforward. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do intersect mask with brush. And then let me toggle this show overlay off so that I can actually see the clouds and see what I'm painting here. And then we will go in and we'll just brush through this. And that's looking pretty good. Okay, now I'll click show overlay just so that we can see how this one's looking. And yeah, it's looking good. That's just exactly what I wanted pretty much. So now we can go in and make our adjustments to the clouds. One thing that I might like to do here is add a little bit of contrast to the clouds. And we got to be careful here because there's already a lot of contrast up there. But this is something that, yeah, you can see it's kind of bringing out too much saturation. Let's actually go down and add contrast via the curves adjustment here. So again, we're just going to create that little S curve. Is going to give us some good contrast in here, I'm hoping. And yeah, you can see it's really bright through there. Drop this. We can use the refine saturation in order to kind of dial that saturation in and make sure that we're not adjusting the saturation too much, which we definitely don't want to be doing at this point. Maybe I'll drop the highlights just a tad to keep the detail in there. And I may do the same thing here with the dehaze and drop the dehaze just to see if I can add a little bit of glow through there. And yeah, it does a little bit, but not a lot. I want to go to maybe -8. I do want to drop the clarity though. That'll kind of help give it that nice fluffy, soft cloud feeling. So drop the clarity in there, and that's looking pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with using these masks here. Really nice what you're able to do here with these tools. There's just so many options, but you can see how there just a few adjustments have really helped my photo a lot. So I want to go ahead and close this down and do some final touches here on my photo. The first thing I want to do is maybe do a little bit of noise reduction. So a shot at ISO 100, it's not too terribly noisy, but this is just something that I think we could maybe fix up, especially with Lightroom's brand new or relatively brand new noise reduction feature. But that's going to be the last thing that I want to do because that's going to create a new copy of my photo. So what I want to do just before that actually is to create a vignette. I love vignetting my images. I think it looks really, really nice. You could do this in the local adjustments there, but I think for this photo, a global adjustment will work just fine. So we're going to drag this towards the negative end, which is going to add a dark vignette. If you go positive, it will add a light vignette, which is something that I really never do. So we're going to bring this down, and I know the sky is getting a little crazy up there. Don't worry. We will go ahead and increase the feather all the way. Give that a little more of a soft look. And then I'm maybe going to expand the midpoint. And we're going to protect the highlights by bringing this up. That's going to protect the really bright spots of this cloud over here. If you bring that up a little bit, and maybe I will reduce the vignette because it is pretty dark on this corner. It's a little dark for my liking, but I think, and maybe if we drop the midpoint a little bit and we reduce the amount, you can see there's like unlimited possibilities here. So you never really know that you could literally do anything. And I could go in here as well. I like how this is looking in the sky. If I wanted this foreground to be a little bit darker, I could easily go in here, and I do this quite a lot, and I highly recommend that you do it as well. You go in and create a linear gradient, and you just hit the bottom of the photo a little bit. This just kind of adds to the vignette, and you want this to be really soft here. You don't want it to be too harsh, otherwise it'll be obvious. So I'm going to create something like that. And then I'm actually just going to drag this down a little bit in order to give the gradient down. And there it is. There it'll drop. We'll uncheck the show overlay box here. And we're going to just go in and drop the exposure just a hair. And you're going to do this essentially. And the thing that drives me nuts about this is the show overlay sometimes takes a bit to go away, but there it goes. So we can drag this down. You can see how it's darkening the bottom of our frame. You could do this on all the corners. You could even use a radial gradient and do this yourself on the image if you want to do it a little more custom. But I think that's looking pretty good. It kind of just helps bring my viewer's eye into the center of the photo. So I think it ultimately is really helping the whole image. It's helping bring you up into the scene. You can toggle it with this eye here. Hopefully your computer will run faster, and hopefully you won't be recording this, because as you can see, that kind of bogs down the machine a little bit. But overall, it's looking really good. So now I'll show you guys just in the few minutes of making this tutorial. We went from this image is before to this image after. So big editing changes and not a lot of time, but it's looking really nice here. I really love how this one turned out. And again, as promised, last thing I want to do is go in here and do the noise reduction. You're going to hit DeNoise. It's going to load up a little dialog box here that's going to allow you to have some options. This photo does not need a lot of DeNoise, so we're actually going to go down to like 20. And then it's going to take a little bit of time to load out here. And then you can go ahead and hit enhance. I'm actually pretty confident 20 is gonna look just fine for this image, so I'm not gonna wait for it to load out. I'm just gonna hit enhance, and that takes a second to load out here. Well, you can see here, we have on the left, we have the DeNoise image. On the right is the image that we just edited. And you can see the DeNoise does a pretty decent job. It's not great, but at the same time, the image wasn't that noisy to begin with. And you could maybe do a little bit stronger of an effect, but I think overall it's looking good. Obviously, you're not going to be able to tell from looking at this, but when you zoom in quite a ways, you can tell a little bit. At the end of the day, it's not that important. If you're just posting online or posting on social, no one's going to be able to tell anyways, but if you are printing, it is something to consider. All right, so there it is. Now you guys can see how you should be editing your photos in Lightroom in 2023. So I do want to note that I think that Photoshop is still a better software for editing your photos, but I think that Lightroom is going to be a lot more attractive option for many photographers. Lightroom's far easier to use. It gives you about 80% of the results you could get in Photoshop in much, much less time. The layer system in Photoshop allows you to do things like merge multiple photos, apply special blend modes to layers, and offer the ability to use special user-created plugins to do almost anything. Now, if you are a new or intermediate photographer, Lightroom is right where you should start. The options provided in Lightroom should be more than enough for you to create some absolutely amazing images. As always, I want to thank you guys for checking out this video. If you have any questions, please drop them down below in the comments, and I will always make sure to try and get back to you guys. And lastly, be sure that if you do want to improve your photography, that you subscribe to my channel. I post weekly videos covering product reviews, tips and tricks, tutorials, even behind the scenes shoots in the field. Thanks again, guys, for watching. We'll see you guys next time.